sorry about the last one. I was just trying to figure out what. Anyway, I'm gonna be talking about fictional characters, or my fictional characters that I've created over years. Um, Again, I'm talking with friends, but they don't have mics, which is okay. Honestly, I don't know if they're ever gonna type to me or not. They're probably focused on what we're trying to do. Sorry about if I'm a little quiet and my family's asleep, so I'm trying to make sure I'm not like, So anyway, I'm gonna have to give you a little imagery. That's gonna be kind of vivid, or gory, or violent. Um, so I'm sorry if it seems a little vivid. So young audiences are probably not the best for this. I mean, there's gonna be no cursing still, but I mean, there's just some stuff that's gonna be there that is gonna be kind of scary for most people. Now, I'm gonna give you a quick little backstory on the character that I speak of. His name was Jake Lava, and he was one of my first fictional characters. So, here's the story. Jake Lava was a man. Well, let me start from the beginning. Hang on, I'm trying to figure out how I could word this correctly, and it may be confusing at sometimes, because fictional stuff. Anyway, here's Jake's story. He was born from a human and what we call shadows. Shadows are a figure that could basically morph into anyone, can seem like anyone, can sound like anyone, but don't be afraid of. Well, in this case, when people say don't be afraid of the dark, you should be in this case. Considering that even in the darkest, blackest nights, even if it was middle of the day, it would be impossible to be able to see them. If you do, all you got are the eyes and the big grin they have on their face. But the grin is the creepiest part. The grin is only white, and that's all you will ever see. But in the few seconds that you see their eyes, you better pray that you live. Anyway, when he was born, his parents had to do something about what they've caused, and a war has happened over the years about shadows and humans. So they were kind of scared about, people coming to kind of kill them. So what they thought they could do was kill themselves. Turns out that when what happened really in Jake's mind, that's what he heard. Really, what they did is that they separated. So for the safety of Jake, but they knew he was gonna find out sooner or later that his parents were kind of evil. But Jake turned out to be the pure of heart, let's say. Anyway, continuing on the story, after he was born, all that happened, and eventually they tried to make a peace offering, or a peace confession or something, I don't know. Anyway, when he said a thing in shadow language, Jake said to the shadows, don't look back when you kill everyone here or when I get killed. And so they knew because they used a translator. So when they started firing, pretty much everyone on the field, but very few lived. But when Jake was the first one wounded, not from shadow but by human, that's when the war broke out instantly, and the shadows won that war. Continuing on, more and more shadows became a thing. Years later, this is about, let's say 12 years later, and like I said, I'm coming up with this, not right all at this moment, but I've had it planned for quite a while. I've been wanting to share it with you guys, but I didn't, want you guys to, think I'm weird. But I mean, I am a very creative person, so this is why I do this. Anyway, so about 12 years later, this is about World War Five. We'll just consider it World War Five. When the war actually started, nothing really was mattered. Nothing counted as anything. So, sup, Nerf. If you've read the description, you're probably knowing what I'm talking about right now. Fictional characters. But when Jake realized he was awake, he remembered a slight eye type thing. He saw like a kind of faded look. Like, let's say I'm you. You can only see out of my point of view. Well, if I'm me, okay? I can only see out of my point of view. But with this camera, I could see a third person kind of point of view. That's basically what the third eye was. But this third eye was technically only an alpha thing. Every shadow had one, but what they didn't see it. But there was a marking directly right here on the chest. Quite large too. If you want me to, I could give you a little imagery, but this is going to require a lot of imaginary kind of stuff. So basically, it was like an Egyptian eye, kind of cool, but technically that symbol was meant for the shadow alphas. His father had it before him, and so on and so forth. Nice, I got 74, 75 right now. Anyway, I'm kind of thinking, well, this is going to be Jake's words. What happened to the world? Because when he woke up, there was nothing around him. Nothing but fire, pain, and a lot of blood. Dead bodies. But most of the time, they were just rotting, decaying bodies. And like I said, this is going to be a little immature for, well, not even immature, just a lot of violence. The more that he saw, the more vivid the memories he had were. But realizing that those memories weren't the real thing, he could still feel the pain that those people felt. He could still imagine what those people went through before everything happened. Yeah, what's your shout out? Just give me your name. Sorry. People in the party are asking for a shout out. I don't mind giving shout outs, but it's going to be kind of hard to do while explaining the story. So while you're typing that, I'm going to continue the story. So the more he saw from the past, the more he noticed things were getting different in his body. Such as he had super abnormal strength. If you want exact amount of strength, he could lift, more than likely, in my count, 2, let's say, freight boats. With freight on them as well. So 2 of those boats, plus millions of pounds of weight. We have a shout out for Sarah. Sarah. There's your shout out, guys. But it seems like as if when more people seemed to find him, the more they feared him. No, I didn't get this from something. I'm actually creating this. I have actually had it for years. Anyway, as life went on for Mr. Jake, or Jake Lava, it seemed to him as more people were more afraid of him when they realized. But what he didn't realize is that he was bleeding pretty badly from the leg. If you guys want, a diagram of what I was saying, let me know, because I can totally tell you where it was. And it's a pretty large cut, too. So, in his thigh, apparently, there was a big shard of metal, about that big, lodged inside his thigh. And, let me get up so I can show you. Alright, so, right there's the thigh, right? From here to here was just one cut. That was a cut in that time. But that wasn't from the grenade, that was from everything else. But after a while, he wakes up in a hospital. Kind of like a mental institute. But he's seeing the memories of his friends before they died. And notice the quotations. A few days later, he's from the war zone. So from the war zone, yeah, I'll totally shout you out. We have one more shout out, I think, for the night, guys. So we have a shout out for Blazer MRX. Go ahead and go check them out. Subscribe if you like to those 2 people. I don't know what their links are, else I would absolutely give them to you. Anyway, on to the story. So, When he got to the hospital, he found medical supplies, and luckily he was a medic-trained personnel. Um, Unfortunately for him, his wound was already partially healed, but the metal was still lodged in. So what he did is that on his thigh, which was a large cut, he didn't like. I have to. I have something to tell you tomorrow if for a suggestion on a YouTube video, but I'll tell you on PlayStation. All right. So when he was in the little wound, you can go like this and see the bone. It was a pretty deep cut. So a few minutes later, he's pulling out the thing, and he manages to get it out, but passes out due to pain. He kind of is still a fighter, but when he's out, or knocked out, or just passed out because of pain, he notices something that he didn't know beforehand. He begins to have a slight memory of something happening during the war, which then realized he had healing abilities beyond human abilities. Like, you cut your finger, right? That's a simple heal. Cutting off your finger is not healable. But in his case, even the worst of things, he could lose his head and be okay. Well, not his head. His head is the main central area. He can lose an arm completely, like, gone arm. And there you go, he's good. He's still living. Another creepy thing about Jake is that later on he'll find out many more things. Anyway, once he wakes up, he hears noises. He doesn't have any weapons with him except for maybe one pistol. But he only has a bullet left. So he says, well, I'll make this bullet count. He puts it in the holster. But when he stands up, he realizes his leg is okay. A few minutes later, a man walks up behind him with a metal pipe and tries to knock him over the head with it as hard as he can. Jake all of a sudden hears the whoosh of the pipe, goes like, what? Turns around instantly, grabs the pipe mid-face, like right here, and he's like, I wouldn't have done that if I were you. Throws the pipe away. Oh, thank you. And like I said, this is all from mind. I don't write any of this down. So, a few minutes later, he eventually gets stabbed by something unexpected. Some kind of arrow lodged pretty much through the kidney area that's pretty much irremovable, except from professionals who, survived the war, were still living. So, the man who tried to mug him eventually, which actually, the man inside the hospital was just trying to get some supplies. He managed to get some stuff. He says, here, take it, but next time don't rob me. Just come and ask me. A few minutes later, he goes out to see what's going on. He finds a village nearby to see, hey, maybe there's some civilization there. But he did see some lights and a couple other things. So he goes over there, partial the way, he finds another mugger who points a gun to his head and says, give me all your supplies or money. Wait, what? Oh. Oh, I like this. This is a nice little chapel. I like that. I like that. Okay, give me 1 second now. Anyway, sorry guys. So, as you kind of, imagining this, I want you to remember this is going to be kind of vivid here in a few. The arrow lodged in his kidney area was damaging him slowly. It was kind of draining his ability to walk, but the man who mugged him, he managed to grab the gun, but the only thing he doesn't realize is that when he goes, he summons his own guns, or swords, depending on, what his battle is. And these are all demon hunting weapons, which I call them demon hunting weapons, but really they're shadow hunting weapons. Anyway, so he kind of continues. I'm watching your stream. Okay, thank you. But kind of listening to what's around him kind of makes him fade a little bit. Like, you can kind of, if you're looking through his eyes, you can kind of see him blurring, coming back to normal, blurring, and eventually just shutting, and then he passes out. The guy who eventually who was potentially mugging him, helped him to where civilization was. He was still pretty weak, but was still able to talk, communicate, and all that stuff. Anyway, um, so as he gets to the civilization, he begins to see the third eye again. Thank you for fixing that. So, shoulder. Let me get a comfortable position. Anyway, so he kind of continues. He kind of sees these things that, are unusual. He sees the government leader who ran him in tyranny, is what he says. Eventually, he wakes up in the house. His wounds are dressed. He's clean. And so on and so forth. His weapons have been cleaned and everything. He's been giving fresh ammunition. And a man was sitting next to him. He asks, what happened? Or, well, actually, Jake. He says, who are you and what do you need from me? The man says, he just looks at him for a few, long blank stare. A couple minutes later, you hear, follow me, I'll show you. So Jake stands up. He's perfectly balanced and not so I'm bleeding out-ish now. But I mean, he would have been bleeding out at the time. About a couple minutes later, they're in the dining room. His family's there. There are children. And he's explaining, I knew your family and I know the marking that's on your chest. Basically, you're an alpha shadow. I can't tell you what powers you really have. All I can tell you is that you have powers beyond human abilities, beyond God's. A few minutes later, he's like, you knew my parents? He's like, yes. As far as we know, they're dead, but we've seen them a couple times here. We always thought they were ghosts. And then one day, he looks out the window. Well, actually, that's future. Anyway, so he hears, open the door, at the front door. The man says, you need to hide. He says, no, this is my battle. I'm gonna fight for what's right. I need you to go, right now. And he says, okay, but first I have something for you. Follow me quickly. It's something that you'll need. He goes to the back room where they would hide, but what they really did is that they packed most of their things and got to the back door. As the family was already out, the man left behind a few minutes said, this is your father's gun, and I want you to have it quickly. This is a shadow defending weapon, and I need you to have it quickly. He says, thank you. I will treasure it forever. A few minutes later, he goes out there, or opens the door. Jake says, can I help you? They say, yes. We've been heard that you have been a shadow. He says, indeed. Now what can I help you with? We need to speak to the family. They're not here at this moment. They come inside, check the house. He grabs one of the people, gets knocked out, brought to the capital area. When he's brought to the capital, he hears slight indistinct voices. With these voices, he can barely make out. He says, can I help you too? The main person who runs the government in tyranny says, hey, we need to know why you have that marking. He says, well, I can't tell you for sure, but my parents, or one of my parents, was a shadow. Alpha. But then he realized, something's not up about this guy. Do I have to speak to him originally? After he said that, the man says, yes, we could see that. A few minutes later, a guy puts up a gun to his head, says, I will blow your brains out if you do anything stupid. He looks at the man and says, I wouldn't pull the trigger if I were you. A few minutes later, the guy starts pulling the trigger. He grabs the arm, breaks it, grabs the gun, and goes, and turns into a secondary of the gun he originally got, which is one of the summoning abilities that I told you guys about. And a little bit later, he says to the one man, says, "Told you." And a few minutes later, the eye that was wounded, which was the wounded bomb incident, is what I'm going to call it. I'm done with the hotel. Alright, thank you. So, when he finished talking with him, he said a quick spell. Really hard to understand, but he's like... He waved his hand, and a few seconds later, the man was like, "I'm sorry. Did I pull you out for something?" He says, "No, I was just leaving." He walks out of the place unharmed. A few minutes later, the family sees him, remembers him, but everyone else who saw who he was and why he was there never knew. But what he didn't know is that the family gave him a hoodie. So what he did, he put the hood up, put his hands in the pocket, and always looked down, so no one can ever see the one eye. And as a shadow, the eye is like almost like large enough to see every day, instead of just seeing that one tiny little ball. In the shadow's eye is just pure red. All in there is pure red. More like blood red, so to say. As more and more time goes on, he finds more and more things about himself. The following day, he finds a very unusual few people. He hears crying for help in about the back seat of a car or the trunk of a car. He couldn't make it out for sure. He said, "What's going on here?" The two men said, "You better go before you get hurt." Jake says, "You can try." They look down at his chest and say, "Well, it seems like you've already been wounded." He looks down at the wound. "You're wrong there." Rips off the dressings, and it's fully healed. Not a scar was there. Nothing. They shot him a couple times with, let's say, 5mm gun. Don't know what I'm gonna say. 5mm pistol, let's just say that. 5mm pistol implants into his chest, but within seconds, the bullet's already out, which they pushed themselves out, and the scar was healed. Yeah. I know this thing on YouTube. But yeah, guys, this is just something I'm coming up for mind. So as more time goes on, after getting shot a couple times, it can't add you. Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know what's going on there. But yeah, guys, I'm just sorry, it's really late for me. This might be a couple part video because I mean, there's a lot of parts that I need to do here. Because I mean, this is a very long story if you don't want to know the whole thing. Anyway, after let's say a month, this is a month later after being the incident. Oh no, it's not because of the contacts. I think it's more because something on your settings or something. Continuing with the story, one day he finds a city. He decides to go near the city, but eventually finds a couple places on the way to kind of loot. One of the places happens to be a high military base. Yes? Oh, that's okay. Well, I mean, it would work better if that was white. Sorry. Anyway, after a couple days, Jake Lava kind of seen more visions when he found one of his friends who shot at him with a sniper rifle, nice bolt action. But like I said, this is futuristic times, so I think it'd be more of a railgun. When he was shot at, he stopped, didn't fear him, looked up and said, "Do I know you from somewhere?" He said, "Yes. You left me in the war of 2020. And this is probably 3 years from now, which is my opinion." Anyway, He's trying to figure out who he is, but can't remember his name or anything about him. He looks back at him and says, "I'm sorry, but I don't remember you." The man says, "You don't need to. It'll only cause more harm." So Jake moves on. The man stares at him all the way through. And if you, let's say, at least a two-journey day walk, half the way through the walk, because, I mean, the vehicles weren't working at the time unless, you had a crazy amount of skill. Give me 1 second. Can you get us on camera? I can get you on camera. I'm doing this on my phone, though, so it's gonna be a little more tricky. I don't know. I don't think it's very easy to do that. But let me quickly show you who's, one of the people that, is kind of listening to the story. Her name, I said her, is Glit Jake Paul, I think is how you pronounce her name. So, and it's because they want to have YouTubers not get all those messages because they are busy and they don't want people to blow up their computer or phone and stuff I think that's why. Possibly. There they are. Sorry if it's a little hard to see, it's a little hard to record. That's her right there, and my friend over there is in the background doing some stuff. But yeah, guys, okay. So, when the story kind of goes on and on, eventually if you guys want me to try and draw this out, I can try my best, to try and give you a story. Or I can try and write books. Don't know. But, so about halfway through the journey, another half day passes. It's already about high noon-ish. It's probably midday. So, he kind of begins to notice something is a little uneven about what he's seeing. Then he has a memory. Kind of gets a little dizzy, starts falling. Someone manages to catch him. It seemed to be a woman. Slight gentleness, but also slight confusion of what was going on. He looks up at her, says, "I know you," in a very light, gentle voice. She said, "Jake?" in a very light, confused voice. He says, "Yes, and you are the one I've loved for years." And she said, "I'm sorry I left you in the hospital, but I was scared that I was going to lose you." They hugged. They said, "All right, well, we have to keep moving. There's something here that's not right." They looked around. Nothing was around yet. But once nightfall came, they had to hide somewhere, as the shadows came by. The only thing that was stopping Jake from killing most of the shadows or making him gone forever / extinct was his father. He remembered that his father turned a little bit evil after the war kind of happened. The only way he could become that way is if it went all the way to his head. The power, everything. Once it went to his head, only half of him turned. Straight down the middle. Half his face was evil. The other half was still evil, but looked more human. Kind of was helpful when he was in the dark, and it was only half lit. He would say, "Hey, Jake." My son walks out of the light. Jake instantly fears. The only unfortunate thing is his father he thought was dead was still alive, but living a new life. Now, about a month has passed. They have found a base, somewhere to settle, and unfortunately kids didn't make it. Kind of sad. No one really knows how they died, but we don't need to mention the specifics. So, he wakes up in a cold sweat, kind of scared, because in his mind he was sleeping, but his mind was still on active scarred mode. So, Eventually, he began sleeping kind of like this, but he's trying to sleep with his eyes open. But when he realized, I don't need to sleep with my eyes open anymore. The third eye is with me. The marking was his third eye. No one really knew, but it's an invisible, kind of like a extra dimension kind of thing. So truly, it's not a physical thing, but only in dreams you can really touch it. Jake wakes up and says, something's coming, but I don't know what. And it's powerful as well. He wakes up the girl, says, we need to go now. In a very panicked voice, she asks why. He says, no time to explain, I'll explain later, let's go. They grab everything, he grabs his weaponry. Eventually he finds a sword, a very ancient sword. But the marking he has on his chest is also ancient, more ancient than anything that's ever possible. But the first shadow is the most ancient thing, who manages to still live to this day. When he realized, well, something's not right about this sword, he picked it up and it showed him memories of who used it and why it was there. It brought him back to where he was at the war. And it was one of his friends who turned out to be a shadow. He wasn't fully shadow beforehand, but when he dies, from a shadow it becomes a shadow. He thinks his friend was dead, and that was a sword for real. He says, this is my friend's sword. He turns it to his own and says, in honor of my friend, I will avenge this poor guy. A couple days later, he manages to find many shadows. He kills them all with a single slice to the head, or anywhere. But when he made it, it was a shadow-killing sword. Much darkness, but with the same darkness as, most things. It became worse for whoever was in his path. One day, this is going to be a couple of years from now, he begins to realize more people are coming after him. More bounty hunters. More shadows. Even Thorn himself was coming. He didn't know how to explain it, but somehow he found a way. Yeah. Well, I mean, depending on what... I think it'll work with any kind of thing. I could be wrong, but there's you go to the camera button. Anyway. This a few years later, he's on a roof. That's where he's found out most of his abilities. The list of abilities he has so far are basically immortality, telekinesis, insane amount of strength, stamina, reflexes, etc. There's so many I could list, but not enough time. He was on the roof. He was fighting a bunch of bounty hunters. When he managed to get off the roof, he jumped off, but another thing he had was kind of a disappearing tactic. But he only used this in specific emergencies. So what he did is he jumped off, fell a while, and disappeared into a shadow. And now when a shadow disappears, it turns into like a mist. A very black pitch mist. A pitch black mist. As soon as that happens, it goes back up behind you, but it's invisible. So when it comes in there... Well, I mean, I could give you my email address, but... I don't know. Anyway, kind of seeing the mist for himself. Sorry. Anyway, when he sees the mist, it kind of makes him think, what's going to happen next? When people realize he jumped off the building, where did he go now? He gets a little scared. He shows up behind him and says, hello, and just grabs him and puts him over the edge, as if he was going to drop him. The man begs for his life, but he says, hunt me down again, there will be no mercy. Doesn't drop him, but throws him to the window under him, very skillfully. It looks like he was about to drop, but what he did is that he put a string near his foot, which kind of grappled him at a specific point and threw him into a window. Kind of shards into his back and whatever else. The man was severely injured. And then Jake walked away without a single slice or anything, a bullet. And he has to go through a forest to get back home. A few minutes, a couple miles walk, he begins to hear snapping branches and twigs, and a lot of other things, leaf crunching. All of a sudden, he hears a whistling noise. And about 50 men shows up, saying, "Halt right there!" When it stops him, he looks at all of them. He says, "You guys really want to do this right now?" The leader comes up, hits him pretty hard in the stomach, makes it look like he's weak for Jake. The man laughs, picks him up. Jake turns into the shadow and says, "You really shouldn't have done that now, you didn't think before you thought. I wasn't dead yet." He grabs the man, forces him into a tree, impaling him on a very sharp branch, about pretty pointy. Goes and impales him. His heart's not showing, but it's pretty dang through there. The man's slowly bleeding out. He walks up to the man and says, "Next time, I would reconsider my tactic." Begins walking back to the center of men, and he says, "Anyone else dare to fight?" The men say, "Why?" And begin to be kind of cowardly when they're the tough guys in this group. Now the leader is almost dead. I'm new to your channel. What? How'd you get my account? Hang on, it literally says that's my account. That's some weird stuff there. That's strange. Anyway. So as soon as he realizes, oh crap, well, one man begins to stand up, and he's the tallest of them. I know. It just looks like it's my name. That's kind of weird. I could also tell because your pick was still there. So when the biggest man says, "I'll fight you," in a pretty deep voice, like, "I'll fight you," Jake says, "Your funeral." When he says that, the tall guy just kind of keeps walking towards him intimidatingly. Jake eventually grabs him, picks him up, and he's about 200 pounds of just pure muscle. And the guy even had a minigun. He used it, killing every other man. But the ones who did survive, Jake said, "Whoever sent you will find me. And will have to kill me first before I make the move." But when the minigun started shooting, most of the men died. About 2 or 3 lived. He managed to, give them a second chance, but otherwise he didn't spare their lives as much. Those who were really dying, the ones who were really dying are just completely dead. Torn in half from the minigun. As the man is still shooting, everything is slower for Jake. The time period is a lot slower. So on and so forth. But as much as he can see things quicker and quicker and quicker than anyone could ever see. And then when he finally got to behind the guy and on top of him, he says, "Let's kill him." What Jake does is begins to choke him out and says, "Next time you'll reconsider." Snaps the neck of the guy, grabs the minigun and says, "It's a shame this is all broken now." Everyone says it's broken. Snaps it in half with just 2 arms. And usually miniguns are very heavy and very durable. Now he bent it straight up in half and it began to snap. A couple of the barrels actually broke. With the super strength that he has, it does make sense. Eventually it became to a life and death situation when more and more men came at him. He still be able to kill them all within 3 to 5 seconds. Yeah, and this is all just for mind, like I said. And as more time goes on, you'll hear more from this mysterious person, the man of the shadows, as they call him. But whatever you do, pray to God if you see him and piss him off. Amen. Anyway, that's going to be the end of this video today. Hope you all enjoyed, and I think I might do another video on this. So I hope you appreciated this little, kind of like a short story. There will be more parts to this, just remind me where I was, and I'll see what I can do. And I'll talk to you all later, Dragon Ears. Hope you had a good time, and peace. Stay strong.